I'm excited to talk about OmniStudio in higher education, where Salesforce has positioned this product. And so I want to first say thank you to all of our sponsors. I've used some of these products, not all of them, but the ones that I have used have been great. FormStack, FormAssembly in particular, Blackthorn, they're great products. Brief introduction, I'm John Radcliffe. I'm a Virginia native turned Colorado resident, been in the Salesforce world for about 6 years now, and I'm the classic accidental admin. I was working at a startup. They said, figure out Salesforce. I quickly transitioned just to doing Salesforce, working with some of my CU coworkers. Was there until just a couple months ago and transitioned to Cloud for Good, where I'm doing consulting for higher education. At CU, we were a beta adopter of Admissions Connect, and then we were one of the first schools in the world to use OmniStudio for our higher education application processes. And so here I am today. All right, so first, I just want to quickly poll the room. Who here has used OmniStudio at all? Okay, cool, great. Who here has used Flow? Okay, also great. You're going to hear me talk a lot about those and maybe tailor my presentation a little more technically. Okay, so OmniStudio, it's the hottest new thing since Marketing Cloud account engagement, whatever that is, maybe Slack. Maybe it's already been replaced by the newest hot thing on the block. But OmniStudio is a product from a company called Velocity. Velocity was a Salesforce venture-backed company acquired by Salesforce in 2020. And Velocity created this product, OmniStudio, to build customer-centric applications for industries, public sector, higher education, nonprofit, a whole slew of other ones. And when Salesforce purchased the product, they really imagined OmniStudio doing the exact same thing. They've rolled it into their clouds, their automotive, financial services, and then the ones that we're going to talk about today, Education Cloud. So I want to talk briefly about OmniStudio building blocks. It sounds like some of you guys might already know a lot of these things, so I'll try to breeze through these. First, OmniScripts. I don't want you to confuse that with OmniStudio itself. It's the classic confusion. But when you boil an OmniScript down to its core, it's just a form that a customer fills out to provide information to an organization, to a school, to whoever. You can distribute OmniScripts in a variety of ways in your Salesforce org internally, on a Lightning page, in your Experience Cloud site for maybe an applicant to fill out an application, and you can embed them on your website, send data back into Salesforce itself. These forms can be super simple, or they can get as complicated as you want them. And really, your metrics there are going to be your business processes and really your submission success rates, what you're willing to risk if you have a mega complicated form that no one actually finishes. Second, data mappers. Yes, data mappers. We'll address that elephant in the room in just a second. But think of these really as your database operations in Flow. These are going to be where you get records, where you create, update records, maybe delete them, that sort of thing. There's a couple different varieties. Turbo Extract lets you just bring data from a single record or related record. Then you have an extract, which is going to be a more complicated thing. Think one record with all of its associated child records. Your transform, you might have guessed this already, but you can transform data. Maybe you did an external call out, you got some weather data, and you need to display it in your OmniScript. This is the way to transform that data. And then finally, your load. This is where you'd create a record, update or upsert a record, and save that data into Salesforce itself. Third, integration procedures. And I want to be specific on this one with how Salesforce defines this. Salesforce defines integration procedures as declarative server-side processes that execute multiple actions in a single server call. And what I want you to take away from that is that an integration procedure can be akin to a subflow. You can do a lot of different things with it. You can get data, you can do callouts to external systems, you can set values, you can pass values back into your OmniScript from your data mappers. Really, the sky's the limit. Think about integration procedures really in the same way that you might make your flows more efficient. Some people know me, I love to make up words. You can efficientize your flows, bulkify them, and integration procedures help you do the same sort of things in your OmniScripts. Last, flex cards. I'm going to talk about these the least today, but FlexCard is just a fancy term for a Lightning Web component that you can create with clicks, not code. It's the classic Salesforce line. We'll talk about that in a minute. And you can populate data with a data mapper, a SOQL query, Apex code, a variety of ways in your FlexCards. And similarly, you can display them in your org, in your OmniScript. Really, the sky is the limit. I said we'd talk about this. So, a plea for help. The most important thing that you should take away from this talk today, Salesforce, in their wisdom, changed mappers from DataRaptors. DataRaptors is a much cooler name. And so this is just a quick request. When you get a free minute, go to the Idea Exchange, upvote this request to change them back to DataRaptors. It's important, it matters.
Can you use a dinosaur as an emoji in that request on the...
You should. So I can already kind of hear what a lot of people are thinking, right? I think this. I can transform in Flow. I can do external callouts in Flow. I can do all sorts of things in Flow. And so I want you to think about OmniStudio as an additional tool in your toolbox. OmniStudio is like Flow, but OmniStudio isn't Flow. And I'm a consultant now, so I'm professionally obligated to say this. But your business case is really going to determine which tool you pick out of your toolbox. Maybe you need to add some custom styling or that sort of thing, CSS to control your branding. And you can't do that in Flow very easily, but in OmniStudio you can. Maybe you want to keep things super simple. You want to be able to quickly deploy, quickly make changes by really any admin these days. OmniStudio is going to have a steeper learning curve, and so Flow might make more sense for your org. Maybe you want to intake data from applicants, and you have a medium to very complicated application process. It's going to be contextually dependent on what you want to do, and so either tool might make sense. So I want to transition to a quick demo at this point. So this is what you're going to see today. I've built this OmniScript for a group in Chicago. And so you're going to see a little bit of hand waving today. This is just a demo org, and so you're not going to see full functionality, and you'll see, like I said, some hand waving. All right, so first, what we're looking at here, this is just the OmniScript. We're in build mode right now. I'm going to walk you through this whole form at the end, but first I want to show you some of these building blocks. Think of a step here really as just a screen in your flow. You can see here, this OmniScript pulls in, a running user's ID, and this screen wouldn't actually display, but I'm passing that in so I can effectively test it. We have a set values here. Think of that as an assignment in your flow. You're setting a value, and then you can call it later in the flow. We have a data mapper here, DataRaptor. You'll hear me use that because I can't quite get over that. And I'll pop this open in just a second. But we have these different data mappers, and you can see here some of them conditionally fire on different things. And so this is going to be a pretty complicated OmniScript in a relative sense. It's got 12 screens. It's got 16 data mappers, 4 integration procedures, and a variety of other set values, error messaging, that sort of thing. All those things don't happen every single time, right? So some things happen in some scenarios. Other data mappers are called in other ones. But you can start to get a sense of this entire process here. So I'm just scrolling through here, and I'm going to switch over to my data mapper at this point. So this is my first one, and this is how I'm going to populate some of the pre-fill information in my form. We start here on this extract, so this is exactly how you would build it. You'd start in the extract and you define your objects. You can see I'm pulling from the application here. I'm passing in this ID, application ID, that I set in that set values, and then I'm getting related records based on fields from the application. And then finally, where we might need to do different things in Flow, we can call in the same operation a contact from the contact. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. But we pull in our field mapping here. And so you can see I've defined application achievements. I'm mapping that into achievements here. You can see this JSON output. I didn't talk about this yet, but this is a good opportunity. Salesforce defines OmniStudio as a clicks, not code tool, and I can't fully agree with that. Technically it is, right? You can click all these things, but if you don't understand JSON language, if you don't understand some of the coding that goes into that, you're going to have a very, very challenging time actually implementing this and making it work. It's a steep learning curve, and if you can already code Apex, you're going to figure it out a lot faster. So we can see here, I'm pulling in application information. Here, I'm pulling in the preparer information. I'm mapping that into the same JSON node for ease of access later in the OmniScript. Here, I'm pulling in student information from the applicant field on the application. And then where I have second guardian here, I'm pulling that straight from that applicant. So it's a related lookup there. And then I can run a quick preview. And so you can see here, it's kind of zoomed in a little bit, but we have a debug log here. You can see errors, if any, pop up. Thankfully, they didn't. And then we can see our JSON, right? And so this is exactly how we would access this information back in our OmniScript. And I know I wish I ultimately had more time because I'd love to talk more about some of these things, but I'm going to speed through. I'm going to pick up speed. So this is a load data mapper, and so we can see that we're going to be updating the contact record here. I have fields, and inversely from the extract, I'm mapping my JSON into the object fields. Doing upsert operation here. This isn't super glamorous, but it's important. And then I'm not going to run this preview, but this is how you do it. Last thing I want to show you before we get to the actual OmniScript is this integration procedure. And so we can see some setup information about it. I'm using a set values to pass in some default and then some actual contextual values from the OmniScript, the applicant ID, and then the applicant's email address to make sure we get the right values. And then I have 3 different data mappers here to get all those records. And then I'm going to populate a JSON node at the end with that information so that I can access it further in my OmniScript. Run a quick preview here. I've populated this with some JSON already, and we're going to execute. And so you see here, app setup data, that node, I can now use that to set values and use that further in my OmniScript. So I'm going to go ahead and preview this. So to give you a quick orientation here, what we're looking at is in preview mode. Like I said already, we're doing some hand waving. If a person was actually using this in an Experience Cloud site, their user ID would be passed in. They wouldn't see this first screen. For our testing purposes, you're going to see it. On the right here, data JSON, you can see the JSON gets created in real time as you either progress to the next step or you add or change answers. On the action debugger, we can start to see all of the data mappers and what we've passed in the request data, what we get back in the response data. And so you can start to do some of your debugging and that sort of thing there before you have to actually activate it, put it into an Experience Cloud site. We're going to go ahead and hit next. And so part of the complexity of this OmniScript is because of the business, right? They wanted all the data to be saved every time a person hit next page. So there's there's a data mapper at the end of every page that saves that information to prevent really some of that data loss from a person maybe abandoning an application and that sort of thing. And so we can see all this information here. Some of this is real, some of it's not real. And we can start to see, let me show you this data JSON. So we can see here, it's the structure of my OmniScript. Under demographics, we can see right away that first college is false. And if I check this checkbox, you can see that this is now true. You can see that data JSON get written immediately. You can copy this, you can put this into your integration procedure or into your data mapper to test some of those operations, which is how I did that. And as this loads, sometimes it's a little bit buggy, but you can also see the additional data mapper that occurred, right? I saved page 1 applicant information based on them hitting next. So we can see preparer information. And this is where you can start to intake as much information as you want. Again, this program only has a single program that a person might apply for. But you can imagine, right, a person selecting other terms, other programs, subplans, that sort of thing, to really customize their educational journey at an institution. And so that's where, you can customize this ad nauseum as much as you want. I'm going to run through some of these steps and show you some interesting things. I've pre-filled all this information, but again, that's an opportunity where really you can, if a person is already known to you, you can start to reduce that friction and ease the actual submission when a person maybe already has information. We can see here, these are some of the conditional elements. Again, there's a lot of similarities to Flow, and I think that eventually these products will merge. They haven't yet, so that's why they're separate tools in our toolbox. Again, we can see all these different data mappers being called here. We can see our data JSON expanding as I'm going through different pages. And I told you we weren't going to talk about flex cards. Part of that is because Experience Cloud is very frustrating in sites, in dev sites. And so they don't run in a preview mode. So I'm going to run through this. I want to focus on OmniScript anyways. And again, we just have pre-filled information. A person might actually fill this out, of course, if they were doing it. So these are actual essays. And so here you can see a set errors is what the OmniStudio calls it. And what this does is conditionally show that error message if 2 of these 4 questions aren't filled out. They only have to fill out 2. And so when I fill that out and tab over, that error message goes away. Again, and some of the glamour features of Admissions Connect makes it hard to push some of the action plans and action plan templates into those orgs. So some of these file uploads I'm not going to demo either. Again, trying to focus on building blocks here more than the nitty-gritty. And then we have our submit application. And that's it. So we've got a few minutes left. Are there any questions? And I can also show some more integration procedures, but yeah.
This question's probably less about the OmniStudio, but does your status indicator for the application surface like that on your on the Experience Cloud page?
This group does not, so they don't want to show admissions decisions before like an actual communication has gone out to the family and to the student. You can set that up. It gets a little bit tricky sometimes with the way Salesforce set up Admissions Connect, and in Education Cloud, you have more flexibility to control that. And we got around that with using a formula field to not show certain values, application values, because we would want to show them submitted, we would want to show them in review, but we wouldn't want to show them denied, for example, or accepted without getting, congratulations email.
But also the steps of the application do show up.
Yes. Yeah, sorry, I think I misinterpreted your question.
That was the second question.
Yeah, great.
These are issues that I had dealt with people in the past that were totally coded.
Yeah.
And painfully coded between an Experience site and Salesforce.
Yeah, so you can control your where that chart shows up. You can not show it with this hide feature. You can show it on the right, the left, or the top. So you have flexibility there.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you run into areas where your OmniScripts are not working, you have questions because OmniScripts are not intuitive sometimes.
Yeah.
What resources have been helpful to you in working through those problems?
Smashing my head against the wall for one. Yeah, okay, we're on the same page there. I've definitely had some hair loss because of that. It's super frustrating. I mean, Trailhead has been super unhelpful, frankly. Like, there's not a lot there. There really are limited resources to get demo orgs and that sort of thing. I honestly have found the community to be helpful, whether that's LinkedIn. This is a crazy, crazy thing, but Reddit has been pretty helpful. And, just trying different things. But I empathize. It's very frustrating. Yeah.
We're Private Foundation. We're about to create a new application process using Flow. With all the frustrations with Omni, just like pro con, why would you go with Omni over Flow?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to styling, and so you have more flexibility with OmniStudio. Flow, I think, has more guardrails, right? And so that is good, right? It's simple. But, introducing some of those Lightning Web components, again, it's possible in Flow, it's more complicated. And so if you're trying to display data, that sort of thing, I think OmniScript does make sense. If you have branding that's really important for your organization that you can't maybe control, one of the things for Mile High Dreamin, there's a specific font that we want to use. And so if you want to control that sort of thing in Flow, it's much more challenging. And so, while those might be minor, some organizations would treat those as higher considerations than others.
Are there any unexpected considerations for governor limits that are different to other functionality?
I wouldn't say substantially different. I think what I've experienced is building, my experience building flows with best practices translated over into OmniStudio. I kind of jokingly say OmniStudio is like Flow. They really are pretty similar. And so, using integration procedures, I think, as much as you can to do that sort of thing. I can pop one open. When I was at CU, we did some different things to save the data because we didn't need to save it after each step. So,
Integration procedure is like assignment.
the set values is that integration procedure is, think of that as like a subflow that you might call from within, and you have a couple different options in there. Yeah. So the question is just how you actually access the context ID in the OmniScript. And again, it's a little bit weird in preview mode. And so when you're actually in preview, you can set it up here, which is what I've done here. In the Experience Cloud site, this OmniScript is embedded onto an application record page. And so when you access that ID, context ID, it's a lot like accessing record ID in a flow. But context ID pulls in the value from that application record page. And so I've set it here in the preview mode. It's really easy. And then in my set values here, I am pulling in context ID here. Pop this open. And so I have an element name, application ID for DR, DataRaptor. Please don't forget to upvote. But you can see I'm using this expression as a value. And so, if you did this, it would pass in literal. But because this is now formula, it's passing that in.
Salesforce is spending a lot of focus on expanding flow capabilities. Are you sensing much product development, product enhancement on OmniStudio over the last, call it 3-4 releases?
I would say less product. So first, I am not Salesforce, but I would say it's a lot less product development right now and product stability, right? They had a lot of bugs, and integrating OmniStudio into the actual Salesforce platform. There's a couple different licensing options that originally existed. And so I think Salesforce has been trying to bring OmniStudio for Velocity as a package name into OmniStudio. And so I think reducing some of that technical complexity has been their focus over product enhancements. I don't know what that bodes for the future, right? If they're spending less time doing new things versus just trying to make the existing product work better. They have tried things, like they've tried versioning on data mappers. That was quickly rolled back. It didn't work very well with the Velocity platform. And so, yeah, I think it's a good question. I think OmniStudio is very interesting. I don't know how long-term it will be around. I do think it'll go to Flow. It doesn't make a ton of sense to have two separate teams doing very similar things, back to one of our questions from earlier.
What's the benefit of using OmniStudio versus something like a third-party form tool that has pre-filled, post-filled, and can do a lot of this without decoding or complexity or that?
Yeah, so the question is, what's the benefit of OmniStudio over a third-party tool like a form stack, like a form assembly, or anything else? It's a good question, and I think, again, I'm professionally obligated to say this. It comes down to your business case, right? And so, if you have a lot of simple forms that you need to embed externally, that is possible with OmniStudio. It's more challenging. And so, if you just have an RFI and then you also have an application, maybe it makes sense to use, form stack, form assembly, something akin to those. What I like about OmniStudio is that it's native to Salesforce. I mean, the other ones are too, but it's native to your Salesforce org, right? And so it's easier to pull that straight into your Experience Cloud site. If you're on an industry cloud, it's not an additional product, right? It's part of that. And so, for our use case when I was at CU, right, it came with either Admissions Connect and now Education Cloud. And so we could then deprecate some of our spending on other platforms because we were using OmniStudio. And that was an important consideration for us. So I know that's kind of an annoying answer, but there are different things. OmniStudio maybe is overkill for an RFI form externally posted on your site. It would work for sure. So if money is important, you might go the OmniStudio route.
That's all the time we have for questions today, guys.
Cool.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
I'll stick around. Thanks, everybody.